Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, both Saadia and Qurat. How are you both doing today?
Wa alaikum salam. I'm doing well, thank you.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Doing really well, alhamdulillah.
Great. So some of you have probably watched Saadia's previous interview with us. And if you have not, I highly recommend that you do so because it was an excellent interview. Saadia herself is an educator, teacher, mother, vice principal, coach. Did I leave out anything? And
I think that's about it. Yeah, alhamdulillah.
yes, and she is also part of a blended family. And so she has much experience with divorce, remarriage, children. And as for Qurat, I've known Qurat for many years, and Qurat has been an enormous support to me in my life, alhamdulillah. And so I always see as being somebody who often offers me cogent advice. And I just felt that the person that I often turn to for advice should be part of this show. So yeah, you both are today. And Qurat, I'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure, alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I am a mother, I'm a daughter, a sister. Those are my connections to my blood, but in terms of my education background, human biology, bachelor's in science of nursing, registered nurse, as well as my graduate work is in teaching and leadership. And I've taken all of life experience and those degrees and kind of melded my own niche in the education realm. And so my focus is the tarbiyah of families and individuals. And so that's what I do right now is the New Cordoba is the name of the venture that I've been doing now for the last 20 years almost, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. And she's definitely underplaying herself. She's also a student of sacred knowledge and just has a lot of life experience and wisdom, MashaAllah. So the topic for today will be about how does one handle an ex-spouse remarrying? And so we'll begin with first addressing the kind of emotions that one would feel when finding that out. And of course, there's no one answer for this because there are an array of possibilities how that might look like. It might be that the woman was aware over a time period that her husband was seeing someone and was like a slow build up to that, to the ultimate marriage, or it might have been a completely shocking and sudden experience where she was oblivious of the relationship from the beginning. It could be, yeah, so there are different ways. It might be that even that she knows of the person and she approves of the person, or it might be that she doesn't know of the person and she doesn't approve of the person. So there are rare possibilities. So if you'd like to expand upon the emotional state that one might experience at that moment.
Sure. So for me, there was no buildup. There was absolutely no heads up, no warning that this was about to occur. In our situation, we live continents apart. After my marriage broke down, I moved back to Canada, where my entire family is and where I was raised, and I brought my kids with me. And then we had worked out a schedule where the kids were going to his country. I don't know, maybe once every 6 months. So they were leaving for the summer, and I was quite unprepared when one morning my kids called me and they said, well, Papa has remarried and she's here. So um, I kind of went through the shock of that with them. So many different feelings came to the surface in that moment, but most of all, I was upset that he hadn't provided any sort of warning or heads up to me, to the children, that he hadn't. Because as a woman, I would have that conversation early on, and just my personality as well. I would tell the other person perhaps weeks in advance, and I would, really work hard to make that transition as smooth as possible for the kids. But my kids, it was just that they went into his room and found out he's married. So that was interesting. That was an interesting choice. I did, and I was upset with him about that. And I expressed my frustration. I've never been shy to do that, back and forth a little bit. But ultimately, I was like, he's allowed to get remarried, and who am I to impose on him the right way to do this or that? Like, so I did cool down quite quickly, the same day, in fact. And I was like, I don't have any rights over this man. I don't have any right to really say, you didn't handle this properly. At the end of the day, I'm so glad my kids called me for comfort in that moment. And that's what counts. And now they will have to adjust, just like millions of other kids have had to adjust throughout history to this reality. And when they get back to me, to their home, then I'll take care of them emotionally. But you know, there will be lots of moments where I can't be there for them and they will just have to cope and manage and adjust on their own. And this is good practice for that. And he will also have to step up in terms of his emotional handling of the fallout. And so I tried to frame it in that positive way where, this was inevitable and now it's here and they all just have to navigate this bridge together and I have to step back. I will not be able to manage absolutely everything for my children. I will not be able to prevent every heartache. I will not be able to prepare them for everything. So it was a good place for me to let go. Not by choice, but by design, by Allah's design.
Mhm. It sounds as if your upset stem from a need for transparency and consideration. Both of those were not met for you.
I'm a planner, you know that about me. So I am definitely somebody who plans in all aspects of my life, work and family. I am also a person who's very big on transparency and honesty. And, we always expect that of other people when we practice it to a high degree ourselves. And part of my journey has been letting go of that from other people, like letting go of the need for constant accountability. Just because I operate that way doesn't mean other people do, and that's okay. Like I will continue to operate that way. I'm not going to adjust my standards for anybody, but especially somebody who doesn't owe me anything. Like, why do I impose my standard on them? It's okay. I will answer to Allah for how I operate, and they will answer to Allah for how they operate.
Thank you. Qurat, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, Saadia said so many beautiful things. And the question that you sort of posed was the idea of the emotional reaction one has when you come to find out, perhaps in a surprising way, like she described, how you would deal with that situation. I think there are two reactions depending on one's situation. On one end, it's like a death because the dream of a marriage is now like, in a way, officially dead. And whatever hopes or dreams you put into that, emotion you put into that, you have to face that reality in a very stark way relative to perhaps a week or month before. And then on the other end, depending on the situation, it might be a great sense of relief and thankfulness. Uh, Relief is what I would perhaps put it, because if the person had sought, like the female had sought out divorce in the situation and something that she wanted, it sometimes helps when the male's attention is now on something else because of a lot of times there's a lot of fighting about the children, or there's a lot of just unnecessary emotional negativity that comes when a person is just like stuck in this place. So those are the two extremes, and I love what Saadia said, which is really what we have to come to as a middle, which is thankfulness and radical acceptance of self and the situation, the reality around us. And the reality is that if someone has moved on in whatever way that happened, it happened. And so we accept it. And it's the idea of being in a place, I mean, ultimately Islam, and in a place of acceptance of reality as it is, and then finding shukr and thankfulness within that space as well. So she gave you a beautiful understanding of her own personal life, and then this is just kind of the overarching sort of things to think about when dealing with that situation.
Thank you. And people have also shared that it's like a new wound of grief that just gets torn open again because it's as if going through a divorce all over again. So they've said that just when you think that everything's fine, I've got this down, I've now settled into my divorce life, I'm so over it. And then suddenly it just feels like you're getting divorced all over again. And so I think that that's the nature of life is that we just constantly throw in these tests, and it's having to navigate them and learn and grow and finally come to acceptance. And then it's going through those, I don't recall exactly the stages of grief, but then eventually the final one is acceptance, right? And for some people, they even if they had an amicable divorce and they wanted the divorce, there is still some upset. So do you have any advice regarding how does one come to terms with that emotion that one may experience? Because apart from the shock of the marriage, whether it's a shock or not, it might also, in contrast, accentuate one's own loneliness, because suddenly one might automatically start comparing your ex's life
Yeah.
compared to your current life.
Yeah. Like, I can only speak to my own situation, although I've coached many, many women through similar scenarios. And there is a big difference between what I went through and other women. And the big difference is that I had closure. Me and my ex-husband, we talked endlessly towards the end of our marriage, and we talked almost as if the marriage had already ended. And so we had all the conversations we needed to have, and there was really nothing left to say. And so now when we separated, I was at peace with the decision, not in the sense that I didn't grieve or I wasn't upset or that I didn't go through the mini death you described, the depression, all of that. I went through my grieving process. But I think mentally, intellectually, logically, I had come to peace with what Allah had decided for the two of us, like Allah's decree, and He had as well. And the thing is, that helped a lot, because I knew, and it was 2 years between our divorce and him getting remarried. I knew he's going to end up remarried. He was a young guy, good looking, eligible bachelor, made good money, religious, all of that. So I knew it was just a matter of time. So in my case, it wasn't that I was upset he remarried. It was just how I found out that upset me. And I actually genuinely wanted his happiness. I came to a realization a couple of years into our marriage that we're not compatible in the long term. Our visions and goals are dramatically different. But I still cared for him. I wanted good for him. So, I tried to be that person. Of course, when you love somebody, you want to be that person for them. You think, oh, this is my soulmate, and I'm going to twist and turn and change and mold myself to be that person. But I did sort of have a slow dawning that I'm not going to be that person in the long term. And I think he did too. And it was difficult for both of us to let go. But alhamdulillah, in some ways, we were able to comfort each other through that. So now, when I've talked to other women, I've realized that's not every. And what's missing in a lot of those scenarios is closure. I think the divorce happens very suddenly for a lot of people. It's not something they've been thinking about for years. It's something that they feel comes out of the blue. And on top of that, they're not necessarily at peace with it, in the sense that they're not able to separate the emotional from the logical. Like, I'll talk to women and I'll ask them, on a logical level, if you saw your sister or your friend in this situation, what would you advise them? And 9 times out of 10, they'll tell me, yes, I would advise them that this marriage is not working, the two of you are not compatible, or there's some serious abuse, and this is not the right situation for you. So I said, in the same way, you have to advise yourself of the same reality. You have to see the reality for what it is. And then heartbreak, first of all, we accept that heartbreak is part of life, and all of us are going through some kind of heartbreak at any given time. And it's not always connected to our marriages, right? That is the reality of the believer, especially. But also, in terms of marriage specifically, that Allah, there was a time you didn't know that person and you were thriving. So Allah put the love for him in your heart, and now you have to trust that Allah will excavate that love from your heart as well, and that you will heal and that you will move on. And so then we start having conversations around tawakkul.
So I don't think that there's a shortcut to go through
No,
grief, right? There's no shortcut. You just have to kind of swim in it for a while.
the only way out is through.
Qurat, what do you
Yeah,
say about all of that, and also just comparing one's lifestyle to, oh, well, now they've got this new happy life and mm,
so I am a big believer in the fact that thoughts are debatable. The thoughts we have are not always true. So when, for example, you asked, how do you cope with surprising feelings or surprising thoughts, right? Jealousy or sadness or any of those things that might surprise somebody. Whatever my thoughts are about something, I write them down. And then I investigate that thought a bit and I ask myself, why am I jealous? Why is one of my favorite questions. Like, why? Why am I
hmm
jealous? Why am I sad? Write it down because otherwise what happens is that we become a jumbled mess of internal, you know, interrogation and self-flagellation, and it can become a very negative space up there in the head or in the heart, perhaps. And I think to be constructive about it is to write things down and really honor the thought and honor the feeling by giving it time and space, but also at the same time determining whether or not it's true. Um, because a lot of times we have thoughts that are not true. Just because we think it doesn't make it so. And so I think that freeze framing it on a piece of paper is a very proactive and very helpful exercise when dealing with emotions or thoughts that, like to use your word, surprise you or haunt you or badger you. So that would be my feedback and advice in this particular circumstance.
and I guess that scrutinizing of thought patterns would extend to, for example, going down that pathway of comparison.
I mean, absolutely, because I mean, as Saadia said, like if your child came to you and said, so and so is this and so is that, what would I say to my child? I would say, well, you are you. You have your own life path. You have your own history. You have your own future, right? So we're able very readily to be able to like see that outside of ourselves, but then we have to turn around and be able to reflect that logical thinking and that clarity of thought and that compassion to ourselves.
hmm
So, one of the things I've seen many of my clients sort of struggle with is the idea that how come he gets to have a happy ending, right? How come he gets to achieve happiness? And so, first, I challenge them to untangle marriage as happiness. Like, marriage isn't the end goal, and marriage doesn't represent that now I'm just living in bliss. And I remind them, when you were married to the same person, were you happy 100% of the time? And they'll say no. And I'm like, but did it appear that way? Like, would your close family and friends have guessed that you had just had a big fight, or that you were really having this power struggle over such and such issue, or this or that? Well, the reality of that marriage was that there were happy moments and there were sad moments and there were infuriating moments. And just like he had that with you, he will have that with anybody else. That's the reality of marriage itself, right? Like, there's no such thing as a marriage that's just happy and peaceful all the time. Every marriage has its challenges, has its ups and downs, and has things at the very core of it that both people are struggling with. That is really why I do think marriage represents half our deen, because having that kind of intimate proximity to another human being, I mean, either you're growing and working on yourself, or you are completely destroying each other. To me, there's no third option. Um, and that person is put into your life by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like to hold up a mirror and be like, here's the areas that you need to grow, and here's the areas you need to work on, and here's the things you need to let go of. And it's this beautiful project, right? And it never ends. So the that's the first thing, is like, let's not frame marriage the way Hollywood or Bollywood frames marriage, as this happy ending where now everybody's just, you know, living a dream. We know that's not the reality. We've all been married. We know that's not what marriage is actually like, right? But yes, there are good moments. And I definitely went through that with myself, is, after I'd gotten over the anger of the way I found out and gotten over the anger of the way my kids found out, that was the deeper anger. I also went through a sadness because I was now single for 2 years. And I was like, am I ever going to get married? Am I ever going to feel that sense of companionship? Is there somebody out there for me? Being single while he was married bothered me. Um, but like you said earlier, like comparison is the thief of joy. So in that moment, I was like, but look at all the things I have that he doesn't have. SubhanAllah, I have the kids. I get to raise these kids. I get to wake up with the kids every day. I get to be closer to them because inevitably, if they're growing up in my house, I'm going to be closer to them in the long term. I get to live close to my parents. I get to have my siblings and their children and their spouses around. I get to be in the country that I want to be in. I get to have this beautiful masjid that I visit. I get to have my friends. And so I literally made a list. I made a list of all the ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me. And I said, I have so many blessings. If marriage comes and adds to those blessings, alhamdulillah. And if marriage doesn't come and I have to just survive on these blessings, then alhamdulillah.
So there was a bit of a technical issue, and you were talking about the importance of coming back to gratitude, focusing on one's blessings, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's twofold. One is our relationship with Allah, right? And the verse in the Quran, if you are grateful, I will give you more.
Mm-hmm.
So just this idea that we should always be living as believers in a state of shukr. We should always be tuned into what we have and not focused on what we don't have. And so that is the only way that Allah will give us more, and also that we will be in a state of pleasing Allah and in a state of abundance. And I think as Muslims, we have to constantly try to tap into abundance. We have to tune into abundance. We can't, um, when we see ourselves falling into sort of this scarcity mindset, or this mindset of this person has more than me and woe is me, I think we've allowed shaitan to come into our heart space a little bit, and we have to then fight against that. Right? That's all from shaitan in my point of view. Um, but secondly, also for myself, and to be able to show up for myself in the best possible way, and for my own peace of mind on a day-to-day basis, and how much I'm able to offer those around me, you have to start from that point of shukr. Like shukr is the baseline emotional state, I think, of every believer. And when we see ourselves getting off course, we have to quickly bring ourselves back on.
Thank you. Qurat, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think just one point. The question in every circumstance in life, and especially these sort of more dramatic ones, I guess, is to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is the lesson or the point of growth in this for me? And to ask that question sincerely, intentionally, and very consciously. And so that when we're confused, we ask that question. When we're emotionally upside down, we ask that question. What is the point of learning and the point of growth in this for me, Ya Allah? And if you constantly turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that, the ways and the doors and the enlightenment, if you want to call it that, it comes with that question being intentional and sincere. And I really loved what Saadia said about abundance, because, you know, when we look out the window, you see a tree. And what is a tree? A tree is a branch and a branch and a branch and a branch and a leaf and a leaf and a leaf and a leaf. And it is a metaphor for the abundance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. Not only the number of trees, but the number of leaves on any one given tree, the number of feathers on any one given bird, the number of lives on earth that are human or non-human. Allah is abundance. And when we narrow what we think is possible, then we've now understood Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his extreme abundance and his ability to um, lead us down a path of growth and down a path of um, self-actualization, because that is ultimately, right, this life is short. Yeah, whether married or unmarried, male, female, whatever it is that our circumstances are, ultimately, it is a temporary position we're in, and we are moving forward into another, into growth, into another place, another phase. So if we keep this perspective, if we understand, I was in a womb at some point, I'm here now, and there's an exit. The task is to live in this place with intentionality, right? And so Um, and understanding that abundance is the core of that. There's not one planet, there's many planets. There's not one universe, there's, according to science, many universes. So we have to think in that abundance. So I wanted to really touch and on that which Saadia said, because I think that's a really important point.
Thank you. When we move to the topic of children, how would you advise a mother explain to her children this new marriage? And of course, this is dependent on the age of the child. And given that the child might have been previously introduced to the new wife or might not have been.
The question has an assumption that it's the mother's responsibility to explain something that's not really her decision, right? So, one thing that was very difficult for me to let go of, because I was in a place in my life at that point where I was trying to protect my kids from absolutely everything, it was very difficult for me to let go of the idea that I'm actually not equipped. I'm not going to be able to protect them from everything. And their father made this decision, and now it's his responsibility to manage their emotions, to manage the difficult conversations that will inevitably come up, and to take the lead on what was his decision. And, I might choose to do things differently. For example, a year later, when I chose to remarry, it was a months long process from the moment of first introducing my kids to that man to then observing him with them as part of my decision making process, having very difficult conversations with him about what he envisions his role as a stepdad, all of these things, all these tests he had to pass, all these conversations I had to have with my kids in the lead up to this marital moment, right? But none of that was my ex-husband's responsibility, and nobody would ever think it was. It would not come up as a conversation that he has to have or that he has to prepare the kids for. So then why did I take the extra responsibility on myself? That I'm the one who has to prepare my kids for this. The kids, alhamdulillah, will also notice over time how parents deal with these things. So it's not my responsibility to prevent every possible heartbreak or mitigate every possible difficulty for them. It really isn't. And when I let go of that, then I felt much better. You know, he even expected that from me, I'll be honest. And I said to him, well, you were man enough to make this decision, and now be man enough to explain and explain it to your kids and manage the emotional fallout and whatever other difficult feelings come up. I'm not there. That helped a lot too. I wasn't physically there. I was continents away, oceans away. So now, you've made this decision, now deal with it, and I really had to back off. And that's not my style. If you know me, that's not my style. My style is to get in there and micromanage, or it used to be micromanage absolutely everything. But I do think that was one of the things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was calling me to, like that I have to finally learn to let go of things that are not in my control. I
Well,
can't possibly control everything.
I mean, the
That was
thing,
helpful.
okay, but the thing that is that what if the ex-husband, hypothetically speaking, is a very irresponsible person and does not take it upon himself? And then as a mother, we are very attuned to our children and we are concerned about
Right.
softening the blow for them,
Hmm.
right? So some conversation would have to ensue in that
Of
situation.
course. I mean, they returned to me a month later and we talked. And more than anything, I just held them. I was present because I can't fix it and I can't solve it. Like that was really it sounds so obvious now, but I know at that time it was mind-blowing. The kids were smaller, and I really just had this like moment where I was like, I'm not going to be able to protect them from this. I'm not going to be able to take away their heartbreak. I'm not going to be able to like say something and now magically they feel better.
Mm.
So all I can do is be present. And all I can do is give them the best possible life that I can give them with the best. When they're with me, I'm emotionally on, I'm present, we're having fun, we're going on adventures. That's all I can do. I can't take the pain away. And It was freeing in a way because there was also a time that I was consumed with preventing their pain. And I also, I think it forced my ex-husband to step into fatherhood in a way that was new to him. Because he had become very used to over the years of me managing all of that. And him just being Mr. Fun who slides in and has a good time and sort of slides back out into his life. And so for him to have to deal with that for the first time, that called upon something new in him as well. It represented growth for him.
Mm-hmm.
Alhamdulillah, the boys have a great relationship with their father. Like we're talking almost 10 years later now. They have a great relationship with their father. They're teenagers now. And, but they saw everything unfold. And I realized that I don't need to manage their experience of the situation. They're going to draw whatever conclusions they draw, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Qurat?
I don't really have a lot to add because I think that that made a lot of sense. And also, the only thing I would perhaps say is whether I'm a mother or a father, right? I'm an adult and I'm a sentient being. So whenever the reason I say that is that if a child is having an issue, he or she would talk to me, and then I would do my best to then be present, to listen, have a heart-to-heart conversation, respecting myself, respecting the child, respecting the other parent. But to echo what Saadia said, is it isn't my responsibility or my duty to not only manage the opposite, so the ex-husband's feelings, emotions, or the consequences of decisions, but the same with the child. And it's a lot of growth, and it's a lot of difficulty, I would say, in some aspects for the child, because it's a point of growth for the child, and everyone is
Mhm.
growing at the same time and in different ways. So it represents a dynamic, but an important one, and part of that same process.
Thank you. When it comes to the new wife, do you think that it is wise to set up a meeting with a new wife or to just not meet at all?
I, I tried with my ex-husband's new wife. I did try. I was not uh, met with the kind of warmth or receptivity that I was expecting. So then I dropped it. Um, Interestingly, though, because I'm remarried as well, what did go well is my relationship with my husband's ex-wife, who I see as somebody who holds a lot of wisdom and intuition, and somebody that I can tap into at any time that I need insight, especially because I'm part of raising her children. So it depends on the person and it depends on the situation, which isn't like the answer probably that viewers want to hear. But from your end, I think you should certainly try. It's always better to be on good terms with people. Islam encourages that. And especially when we're all involved in raising children, I think it's a win-win, right? To be on the same page and to be able to have conversations, but not everybody's open to it. So, alhamdulillah, with my husband's ex-wife, we were maybe from the same sort of community, and I kind of knew of her, and I had talked to her to sort of vet him before marrying him. So she had a lot more receptivity to the idea. With my ex-husband's wife, she didn't know me from a can of paint, and she probably had a lot of distortions because she had only heard one side of the story, of course. And so she was definitely not, in fact, she was even, I would say, hostile initially. And then she sort of neutralized when I saw that I'm not trying to get anything. I'm not encroaching on her space. There's nothing I want that she can give me. There's nothing I'm trying to take away from her. So it really depends on the person. It also depends on you, right? If you come across, and I've counseled many women through this situation, if you come across as warm and receptive and kind, I think most people do respond to that positively over time. The other thing I will say is to not interfere. I've seen women interfere in their ex-husband's family, in their ex-husband's home life, to offer commentary where it's not your place to offer commentary. You have to decide early on what's really important to me. What are some lines that absolutely cannot be crossed? And then if those things are not violated, you have to just learn to stay quiet. Even when you see something that's not your preference, you cannot interfere because it's not your place to. It's not your place to comment. Also respecting the other person's boundaries. For example, um, I had a situation with one of my clients where she was in trouble and she called her ex-husband for help. But that's inappropriate. It, he's not your husband anymore. So you're now infringing on another woman's rights because you're the only scenario in which I should be calling my ex-husband is if it has something to do with the kids. If I'm just calling him for something I'm going through because he's an easy or familiar source of comfort, I've now crossed a line. That man is remarried. And would I like someone to do that? If I'm married to, like, would I want my husband's ex-wife doing that? Of course not. That would be really inappropriate. So really understanding boundaries and controlling your own need, perhaps for access or your own familiarity with that person. And when the new person sees you doing this a couple of times and really having respect, they will relax. That's what I've seen anyways. But if you're constantly present, constantly interfering, constantly sort of, even I've seen, making comments about how much you know this man because you were married to him first and you're the one who was with him for 15 years. I mean, of course it's going to put another human being off. Of course that's inappropriate. So we have to control that impulse in ourselves as well. And the hardest part of that for me, of course, was I feel like, I feel like somewhat of an expert at parenting. And so watching things, observing things that I knew were not in line with my vision of what good parenting looks like, and then staying quiet, not commenting, not having an opinion, not getting involved. Oh, it was difficult, but necessary.
Mhm. I think a couple of things that came to my mind with your question were like strategies of acceptance is always like the question. What are the strategies that I am going to employ to accept reality as it is? So I think if there is a new wife in the situation, that's reality, and one has to be in a state of acceptance. Um, as stated before, every circumstance and situation will be slightly different. But let's just say a general situation. Um, I think it's really important to pray. And for some people, it sounds really
Mhm.
odd, but pray for the new wife, pray for the ex-husband, pray for your children, because we're all in this together, whether we like
Mhm.
it or not, but we're all in this together. And the other piece of that is you said, should I set up a meeting? And I think it could be a very healthy thing to set up a meeting and just have a very open, kind, loving conversation about, you know, whether it's the child or you know, the situation, but setting up maybe not only boundaries, but also more importantly, modes and methods and means of communication that are healthy. And I love what Saadia said about also monitoring our own impulses, right? Because an initial good conversation, an initial good, meeting to strategize ways forward, being there, sometimes later on that turns into, you know, gossiping about with each other about things, or, negative can go in a negative direction, or like saying, yes, I've known this person forever and I know he's like that. Things like that do happen. So that is obviously those impulses you want to stay, be aware of. But I think, should a meeting happen, is communication important? Absolutely. If it's possible within the circumstance, absolutely something to be proactive about, intelligent, and self-confident about. I would put those three things together.
I
Well,
envision
I
that.
just love what you said about confidence. I think that's key as well. What I'm thinking about right now is so many of my clients who have been through this situation or people I've advised in the community, and I think confidence makes a huge difference. Self-confidence, knowing what you bring to the table, feeling secure in your own marriage, not comparing, because there's a certain energy you put out when you're confident that puts others at ease. And then there's a different energy you put out when you're jealous. And I think jealousy stems from a lack of self-confidence. And so your orientation is outward, your orientation is external. And what I would love for Muslim women to do is to have such a solid um, internal orientation that they're just oozing confidence in these meetings, not cockiness, not arrogance, but a sense of strong self-awareness, dignity, and just a recognition of what they bring to the table so that there's no feeling of jealousy. Certain people, when they get a whiff of jealousy, they look for ways to exploit that. They look for ways to um, manipulate the situation and make it worse. So just being so confident in ourselves that we don't allow for that opportunity, I think is very important. Um, as with certain types of women, as soon as you might think you're connecting, and I'm thinking of two specific clients here. You might think you're connecting through showing vulnerability, but what you're actually doing is inviting manipulation. So I would say in those meetings, like whatever you can do to boost yourself up beforehand, whatever you can do to remind yourself of all your good qualities, whatever you can do to self-regulate, because it's very difficult sometimes, right? I know I felt intimidated the first time I met my husband's ex-wife. I was like, they were together for 17 years. He loved this woman. He had 3 children with this woman. I was intimidated, and she's beautiful. And so reminding myself, well, I'm beautiful too, and I bring a lot to the table. And if their marriage was working, they would have still been together. And maybe we'll have children too one day. Like all of these sort of reframings I had to do with myself internally ahead of meeting her, so that I sort of to remind myself, well, you actually are pretty awesome too. So, you don't need to compare. She's awesome, but so are you, and just that we all need to do that in these difficult meetings. Like we have to go in self-confident and retain our dignity.
Mhm. It seems that this meeting can only happen once one has gone through those very destabilizing initial emotions, right? Because you have to have yourself together, and it always comes back to working on yourself, boosting your own confidence, whether that's in your own internal dialogue or with supportive friends or coaches, mentors, that type of thing, right? Now, when it comes to,
Yeah, I wanted to just comment
yeah.
on that. Like, I always advise women after they go through divorce, and because divorce is so hard on one's self-esteem, to go underground for a little while, right? Cut off everybody except essential people, to surround yourself with warmth and love and safety, to not put yourself in harm's way emotionally, or to put yourself around any kind of toxicity or manipulative people or anybody who makes you question your self-worth, because you're going through a trauma
Mhm.
and you don't want to put yourself in situations like, if you just had a deep cut, you wouldn't put yourself in situations where where the wound could have a chance of being reopened.
Mhm.
So to go underground, really work on yourself, develop and connect with Allah, develop that relationship with Allah, and to only surround yourself with people who are 100% safe and warm and positive energy. I think that's very important to reclaim yourself after divorce, because divorce is a trauma, like Qurat mentioned earlier. And so you don't want to put yourself in traumatizing situations immediately. You want to build up your inner reservoir and then sort of reintroduce yourself back to the public or to normal situations. And then once you're back to yourself, then of course life like gives us all kinds of relationships, and not every relationship can be warm and fuzzy. Some relationships are difficult, but now you can deal with it.
Mhm. Qurat, what's your opinion on this? So I've heard two opinions. The one, they say, oh, you should totally speak to the new wife because she needs to know who is the mother of your children. You need to like pretty much lay down there that I am not afraid of you. I am the mother, etc. And perhaps have a meeting about your parenting values and that type of thing. Then I've heard the other opinion, which is that you could do that, but it's pretty much a waste of time, because if you are a principal at a school and you tell teachers how to teach, they're going to say, yeah, and they're not going to change the way that they teach. That's how they teach. So you can't make somebody parent the way that you parent. And if anyone is going to have influence over that new wife, it's going to be the father, but not you. Any comments? I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, so there's a third way that we can approach this. So neither do we have to micromanage what someone else is doing with our children. But on the other hand, we can have a caring and kind and confident conversation that, these are things that are important to me. Um, and I'd like to share them with you, not because I want to micromanage what happens in your household or anything like that, but I just want to share with you what's been important to me in these years of raising my child. And now I'm entrusting my child in some hours, in some days, in some time with you. And so having a conversation that's caring of the child, of your relationship with the child, and communicating that with this new person that's in the child's life. But you have to be very careful and not, I feel, not be to lean too much in that direction. So that would be, cautious but and kind is how I would approach that. And I also wanted to piggyback on something that Saadia said, which has been in my mind as we've been thinking about this topic, is that solitude and khalwa and retreat after such a difficult and traumatic experience, that is so important. And we see this in the tradition of the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, is the idea of khalwa and taking periodic khalwas every year. It's really important to do that sort of retreat and self-reflection, no matter what, especially after these very big life events that occur, so that then I can have that meeting with anyone, whomever it is, ex-husband, new wife, whatever, whoever it is, child, parents, ex-in-laws even, right? I can have those kind, caring conversations because I have licked my wounds, I've healed to as much as, as much as we can as human beings, healed myself, and then I've moved forward and I've done it with all these things in mind. So that's what I would offer based on what Saadia said as well.
Thank you. Saadia?
When you feel the need to go in and say, I'm the boss, you're already revealing your insecurity. Because a real boss, a real leader, doesn't feel the need to say that. It's already known, it's already understood. So when we come at another person in this manner, we're actually already operating from a place of weakness. Because if you just observe me and you just observe me with my children, you will already understand this reality. You don't need me to tell you. It doesn't need to be said. The moment I feel the need to tell somebody, I'm already weak. Now the other, by the way, it's not advisable to have these conversations with everyone. Like if someone's openly hostile to you, you don't want to have these conversations. Okay, like you don't need to put yourself through that. But what I do like is the idea of having these conversations with your ex-husband instead of with the new wife. Like we need to remind ourselves he's very much part of the equation, right? So one of the conversations I think was necessary for me and my ex-husband to have is, hey, I don't know this woman, but me and you share values on parenting. So I just need to know that she's aligned with this, this, and this. And I'm now talking about the things that are absolutely important to me. For example, it came to my attention that she was a convert, right? She wasn't Muslim. So I wanted to know the extent of her practice. I wanted to know, is there any chance that she's going to be teaching our kids the opposite of what me and you have worked so hard to teach our kids? So to make sure that we're all on the same page in that way doesn't necessarily require me to talk to her directly or to do an interview. It really just requires for me and my husband or ex-husband to be on the same page. And likewise, when I was about to marry my husband, it was very important for my husband and his ex-wife to have certain conversations about who I am and what kind of values I represent and how my parenting philosophy might differ from how they've raised their kids. Right. Alhamdulillah, she also had a conversation with me about it, and I think it went really well. And she was like, "Okay, I can see that this is one thing I don't need to stress about." That's what she told me. It's like, I don't need to stress about this at all. I think we're on the same page, and you obviously love kids, and you have um, uh, such an affection for mine already, and so I can relax. So it can be very like it can be a productive conversation, but I don't see it being a productive conversation if we ever go in with this energy of I'm in charge and you better do what I say. I'm the leader of this. I don't see how that would work. I think it also takes away from a man's power in this situation because kids need their mother and their father. And so if we're talking woman to woman, here's how we're going to raise the kids, it's sort of like ignoring the reality that so much of what happens in a home is set by the male figure in that home. And certainly now, if somehow, if in some way my ex-husband's new wife did something that I thought was really like poor parenting, which alhamdulillah never happened in my case. Now I have somebody that's actually has he has some accountability towards me. We share these children. Whereas with her, she could quite honestly say, I don't answer to you. And the truth is she doesn't. But she certainly answers to him. So if I can um, define the problem, if I can convince him that this is a problem, and if we have shared principles on parenting, that shouldn't be hard. In my situation, it's not hard. We do have very similar principles on parenting. Then it's his responsibility to enforce that. But if I'm in another scenario, right, where I've seen women be, is where they come to their ex-husband with a concern and he says, well, that's not a big deal. Or she didn't mean it that way. Like they're dismissed, right? In one sense, I'll say to those women, well, you have a history of being dismissed with this man, so what else is new, right? You understand this was coming, right? But also now, what else can she do? Like, I'm very much about people operating within their power. If something is beyond your control, and it really is beyond your control, what happens in someone else's household, then you don't really have any tools at your disposal. I mean, if it's a really like gross violation, of course, you should get turn to legal avenues, or you can get an imam involved or family members involved. But most of the time, it isn't those things. It's just things that go against our preferences. So understand that lots of things are going to happen that go against your preferences, and you don't have complete control over it. You can make dua for your kids. You can set you can be a good role model in your own home. You can set your own priorities and principles, but you can't go into your ex-husband's home and now create a clone of yourself and tell that woman how to be. You simply can't. So this is about acceptance once again, and that seems to be the theme today. Accepting what's in your control and what's not in your control. And no amount of conversation will control certain outcomes.
When it comes to managing, shifting, co-parenting dynamics, that can be challenging because now suddenly everything's different. There's another person on the scene. You are not the only maternal figure in your child's life or children's life. There's another maternal figure. So that's like a really, like, I imagine it as being a very strange transition. Qurat, do you have any insight on that? And I've heard you mention before, Qurat, that don't use the children as a source of information. If you'd like to go into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, our children are not pawns. We have to be very respectful of their emotional and mental state. And the minute we might, detect within ourselves the need to like find out information or to understand how things are being done or where are they going, you check yourself and you realize that's not coming from a place of health or kindness or support. It's coming from a different a different place. And with regard to co-parenting or logistics and all that stuff is, I think a really important thing is I want people to be kind, considerate, as well as flexible with me. So I'm going to offer the same to others to the best of my ability, with a balance in mind that I'm not also a rug, a mat to be walked over, right? There are boundaries, and those need to be understood by yourself and then by other people as well. So that balance has to be there. Um, but being flexible, being open-minded, being kind-hearted, those will go a long way to help in dealing with all of that which childhood brings when you're raising your children, all the different places they go, things they do, and experiences that they have. So having that as a baseline will allow you then to do that with efficiency as well as um, elegance. I don't know what the right word I'm looking for, but do it with ihsan is really what I'm looking for. With doing it with excellence, because you're being excellent to yourself, excellent to your child, and excellent to the other adults involved in the situation. So,
Let's look at that practically. So, say, for example, now
mm,
suddenly there's another person on the scene,
mm,
and mashallah, they have a great relationship, she and the children, and she might end up doing things for the children that the mother herself doesn't do. You know, extra things that are enjoyable or fun, delightful, all of those things, affectionate. And that can be, again, a bit alarming for a mother, where it's like, hey, you know, am I supposed to be doing things differently as a parent, as a mother? How do I handle the situation? Maybe then there'll be those initial feelings, for example, of fear. You know, is my role as a mother being compromised in some way? The fear that the child or children might end up wanting to fully transfer to that household, etc. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are the initial, I would suspect, feelings that would be experienced at that transitional phase, you know?
yeah, I mean, fear and competition, where does that stem from? It stems from either a lack of confidence or a lack of understanding of who you are. You are the child's mother. You're the one who carried that child in your womb. You're the one who nursed and raised the child to at least the point they're at, at this point in their life. And no one can replace that. That was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decision. And with that in mind, if someone does something good with or for your child, alhamdulillah, shukr. And if there's something of that seems like, oh, that'd be interesting, I might like do something along those lines with my child. Okay, but it doesn't come from a place, inshallah, of fear or of competition, of jealousy. I know it's easier said than done, so I don't, not trying to make light of it, but I'm saying these
Mhm.
are these are the circumstances in which you practice radical self-acceptance and radical acceptance of reality as it is. And there's, as you asked, earlier, what's the way forward? Well, it's through it. It's through these little things in life that we see are as little, but it's that Saturday soccer schedule and whatever jealousy or competition or whatever that it might bring forth. That's the way through. Is managing emotions, managing thoughts, and finding that place of magnanimity and flexibility, confidence, and kindness through all of those little things. Um, and learning, uh, really understanding how to let go of and not micromanaging and not getting oneself all tied up and twisted over little things,
Mhm.
and not seeing it as competition, seeing it as contribution to your growth, to the child's growth, and ultimately to this family, this new blended family.
Saadia?
It helped a lot when I realized that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a journey for me and He has a journey for my children. And I'm not going to be able to write that story. They have their own story, and every single person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings into their life is by design. So the way I would feel very good, like let's suppose my brother took out my kids for a day out and they had a really good time. They went to the beach or they went to laser tag or whatever. The way I would look at that as a positive experience, because of course my kids gain something from that, right? And it doesn't have to be through me that they gain every positive experience. Then that's the way I have to start looking at him and the new wife. I have to just see these as a more positive experiences that my kids get to have. And not every positive experience in their life is going to come through me. That helped me a lot personally. I think that's helped other clients when I've shared that with them. The I think I love everything Qurat said. I mean, there's just one thing I would add. We have to pay attention to what's being triggered in us the moment we're triggered. So that deep self-awareness, okay, why is this bothering me? Okay, what's exactly going on for me here? Right? That conversation is essential. I had a client once who told me, and it appeared as if it was jealousy, right? On the surface level, this new woman, she's doing so many things and all of that, and it makes me feel like a bad mom. But then when we went a little bit deeper, she admitted to me, I've sort of checked out from parenting. I just put the TV on, I do this, I do that. So I'm like, so you're not exactly jealous that she's doing these things? She's like, no, I view these as positive things and I want my daughter to grow up with all of this. You know, I'm like, so what's really going on? And she identified that what really was going on is that she was being called upon to bring a higher caliber of parenting into her own practice. And it made her uncomfortable because it required growth. And so it really had nothing to do with the other woman. It was just reminding her of something in herself that she had kind of put on the back burner. And once we identified that, I said, well, that's a solvable problem, right? Let's start making a list of things you can do, and let's start understanding what caused you to get into a rut with your parenting, because we all do from time to time. We start focusing on other things, right? So we talked about that at length, and then she was like, really excited to start implementing a new approach to parenting, a parenting plan. And the thing is, it had nothing now to do with what the other woman was doing. So the jealousy wasn't really jealousy. The jealousy was the discomfort of realizing she had let go of parenting in the way that she wanted to.
Thank you. Insightful. So now what if the woman has not had a discussion with the new wife and she happens to bump into them at the store, either with the ex-husband or maybe alone? It's a bit awkward if it's just the two women because each person obviously has perhaps seen pictures of the other, but there's not been actually a formal introduction. So in those possible two scenarios, how would you advise? And this, this might seem as a silly question to some, but it really isn't, because these are the kind of practical things that women in the situation want to know.
It's gonna sound a bit repetitive at this point, but just self-regulation, confidence, taking a deep breath when you see somebody. And I think one thing that really helped us, I'm going to toot my own horn here a little bit, is whenever we're with my husband's ex-wife, I defer to her. She's their mom. I don't try to take leadership or show what a great person or great parent I am. I don't need to. I just defer to her. She's their mom. She knows better. She knows how to love them in the deepest and most intricate ways. I just, whatever sense of competition anyone could have, I dismantle it immediately just by choosing not to participate. And she doesn't either, by the way, but there's certainly, people in the extended family and relatives and friends and stuff that are so scripted to look for that they're just like almost expecting it. And so I think we've both done a good job of consciously just dismantling it. But the first step that was required from me was that I had to just defer to her. Like, and I have no problem doing that. She is the expert on her children and she loves them much more than I ever could. And so why wouldn't I defer to somebody like that? Right. So that's
Right.
part of it. Yeah.
Right.
Part
Yeah,
of it is just the self-regulation piece again, right? Like when I'm in any kind of awkward situation, let's suppose I bump into an ex after 20 years from high school. What do I have to do? I have to self-regulate. I can't just be like crying or upset in public. I can go cry later, no problem at all, right? And I might. but like, or, you know, feel that sting and then be totally cool as a cucumber on the surface. I think that's really important for all of us to learn to master. And no one said it's ever easy. It is difficult. Whenever you run into somebody, like I had a friend that kind of broke my heart. So this is not a romantic situation, but I had a friend that she ended her friendship with me. And I still feel that pinch if I come across her on Instagram with other people, or if I like bump into her at an event. I feel that sting, you know, like um, I saw her somewhere and in the summer, and I had to like go to the bathroom, sort of breathe, collect myself. But she wouldn't have known any of that. Maybe if she watches your podcast now, she'll know. But the thing is, like, subhanAllah, we have to do that regardless. Life puts us in many such situations.
Mhm.
I think the scenario that you know, pointed out, if the children are there or not, modeling respect for yourself and respect for another human being who's walking a path. You know, we are all in that, doing that. So yeah, I think nothing to add, but reminding yourself of yourself. I'm respectful, I'll act as such.
How would you deal with an ex now introducing the new wife to your social circle, your community, your masjid? That's another new dynamic. And that can become awkward if you've had common friends.
It's hard, but it's doable. Because, you know, I have my own family and my own friends and my own little community carved out and everything like that. So I don't feel like I think the core feeling that one has to acquire is I'm not in competition with anybody. I'm in competition with myself from yesterday. So regardless of what happens um, with anybody else, I have my life. I'm thriving. In fact, I have a beautiful home. I have my kids. You have to constantly come back to gratitude, right? And to not even allow yourself emotionally, mentally to set up any kind of competition with another person. Um, I'll tell you, me and my husband's ex-wife, we only ever talked on the phone. Uh, so meeting her the first time was extremely awkward. But one thing she did to immediately neutralize the situation, I really respect her for this. Um, we were in a very crowded place, and of course, people were watching us. I'm the new wife, she's the old wife, right? And we were at an event, and she just came up and hugged me, and my kids were there and her kids were there, and my kids still, they have told me that, you know, the words they use, mad respect. That's what they said, you know, like it was awkward, like how are we going to greet each other, what's, and that just sort of neutralized things, it calmed things right down. She came up, she hugged me, and then we just started talking, and I had forgotten, you know, for a moment that she's my husband's ex-wife. Like I just started talking to her normally. So looking for ways to neutralize awkward scenarios, potentially awkward scenarios, being the person that takes the initiative to do that, I think only earns people's respect and only earns your own respect as well.
Mhm. Yes, and I've heard that one shouldn't say, oh, I am so and so's ex wife, but to focus on the fact that I am a woman of God and I am my children's mother. So I think that just
Mm.
framing that in that way is also quite helpful. So, ladies, in conclusion, is anything you would like to say to our audience in closing?
One of the things I've been very thankful that been taught in my life is that a woman's worth is not whether or not she's married, whether or not she's a mother, whether or not she's has a certain degree. We are worthy regardless of those things. And when we accept our fundamental humanity and realize that whatever we're going through in life, I don't have to be married or to be a mother or to be anything, but I might fall sick. I might meet with an accident. I might have some sort of traumatic experience unfold around me as we see right now in the world. Um, so what my way forward is through whatever circumstances and situations are in front of me. So I guess my wrap up is to say marriage shouldn't consume us, but if we're in one or we've just exited one, it should be a point of education, just like every other thing that we are met with in life, is to find self-understanding, understanding of Allah, understanding of the world Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, so that balance and equanimity is what we should be looking for and seeking, inshallah.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think I've said this a lot on my page, but we've allowed Hollywood, Bollywood, and all the social conditioning we've grown up with to sort of give us the message. And we've, many women have, including myself, a past version of myself, have sort of this belief that marriage is the greatest accomplishment of our lives and it's the most important thing we'll ever do. And I don't believe that anymore. I think if you're married, you are met with particular tests. And if you're not married, you're met with different tests. And we're all constantly dealing with some kind of test, some kind of problem, some kind of heartbreak. And, you know, the idea that uh, a man and my relationship with that man should define my entire life is really problematic. And it's something that's so many Muslim women still struggle with. What I would rather we do is really connect deeply to Allah, to develop our relationship with Allah, to constantly work on ourselves spiritually, and to define ourselves outside of our roles. Of course, our roles are important. Our roles as a daughter, as a wife, as a mother, very, very important. But you're somebody beyond those roles. At the core of who you are, what makes you thrive, what makes you happy, what makes you grow, it's not necessarily that all of you is your roles. Your roles are an extension of you. And inshallah, we're all doing justice to our roles and doing a good job with our roles. But there's somebody that you are outside of those roles. And I just want women to realize that, to reclaim that. I think so many other things in our lives fall in place once we fall in love with ourselves.
Thank you so much. It was beautiful hearing from both of you. I really appreciate your contribution and time. And I wish you both the best. I mean,
Thank you for the
Thank
opportunity. Thank you.